Now is episode 2 of 4 of our preview NHL Divisional episodes. In these shows, our experts will tell you who to watch out for on each team and what we predict will be the outcome for each of them. Next up, the Discovery NHL Central Division. Hit the music. Welcome to Slam Sports Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Borjaranov, and the mic is always on. You can find me on Twitter at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with 3 hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website. Go to jablamsports.com. See all our podcasts and even game notes for each episode. You'll get links to all the things we mentioned on this show, including guests. For our podcasts, click on podcasts and then hockey on this show specifically right on our website. Now we head over to the Old North State and talk some Canes with Brett Finger. He's a senior writer for Canes Country. You can check out their website, canescountry.com. You can also follow Brett on Twitter at Brett Finger. Brett, do some people sometimes mix you up with Jeff Finger?
I've gotten that before. I have. It's a unique last name, and I'm honored to share it with such a legendary figure in Jeff Finger, Maple Leafs royalty, for sure.
Yeah, I guess
something like that, right?
Yeah. Some fans might not have liked him on the Leafs, and I remember there were some days. Where it was like, I can't remember. I think I remember there was one game they played against Columbus, and they beat them like 8-3. The Leafs won 8-3, and then people looked at the stat sheet and saw Jeff Finger -3.
Oh,
and we all just like, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah,
that's about what I remember of him.
he was a great guy, and it did think me that I'm like, when I saw your name, Brett Finger, it mixed me up with Jeff Finger, kind of even similar with the first name. And it was like, this is pretty cool. If Jeff Finger is now a writer for hockey after his career, it's pretty cool
for the Hurricanes of all teams too. Yeah.
So let's talk Canes. There wasn't really a big splash, but a lot of the Canes, of course, their core is fairly young. Again, Justin Williams retired, and they've added James Reimer on a 1-year deal and Jesper Fast to 3 years. In the sprint of this short season, how will Reimer, of course, ex-Maple Leaf, help out the Canes?
Reimer is obviously a veteran goalie. He had his first year in Carolina last year with Mrazek. Statistically, he was better than Mrazek. I think he probably overperformed what was probably expected of him. Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic that the Canes have in net. Peter Mrazek is known for being a bit erratic, a little wild in the crease, not a very composed style of goalie. And I think James Reimer is a little bit the opposite. He's much more safe. He's not a great puck handler. He isn't encouraged to leave the crease a lot. So it's an interesting dynamic. There are people who think that, if they had a true number one, then the Hurricanes would probably be among the teams competing for a cup, and who knows if they will or not with this goalie tandem. But it's definitely an interesting dynamic. I would expect the starts to be about 50-50. They were like that last year before they both got hurt. I know you might remember the David Ayers game was the game that Peter Mrazek came out of his goal.
Yeah.
And I believe it was Kyle Clifford who rolled him over, and that led to everything that happened in that game. And he missed some time. But it's an interesting dynamic in net. And I think that Rod Brindamore, Canes head coach, I think he has trust in both of those guys, and it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out.
Oh my goodness, you reminded me of that crazy game. And I don't know if a lot of Jablam hockey fans, as well as people who follow you as well, have checked it out. I have it on my website. I did a mini series last year called Russia 98 on hockey. You can go to jablamsports.com/episodes and check out that season from last year. And there was one episode where I did, basically right after that game, I recorded me freaking out. So it's Dangle-esque, I would say. And you could hear that. I recommend anybody listening to this right now, check that out. That was ridiculous. I was really proud for David Ayres. I was just frustrated specifically with that game. But that's kind of how this young Leafs core is, if you're talking about just based on that, is they kind of let up a little bit. And that's basically kind of what they did that game. But it was great for David Ayres to get a nice win for a emergency call-up e-bug type goalie. Good for him. When you're talking about people not sure about the Canes and their goaltending being contender-esque, we will talk about Svechnikov and a few other players who could break out, but I kind of wanted to step to what your feeling is within this Central Discovery NHL Central division. I feel that a lot of people still aren't too sure where the Canes will end up in this division, but a lot of people feel like it's pretty open-ended. It could easily be like a top 2, but maybe it's a little bit lower. Where do you feel they could end up at the end of this division?
What's interesting is the Hurricanes have been in a division that has been pretty challenging in the Metropolitan Division for a few years. They finished 4th there last year. They've been getting better. This division, it's obviously top heavy with Tampa. I know Dallas is going through some injuries and they've had some COVID stuff going on, but they did make it to the final last year. But outside of them, I'd say it's a less challenging division than the Metropolitan, where you had Pittsburgh, Philly, Washington, etc. I think it's 2nd or 3rd. I think that an advantage that the Hurricanes have is there isn't much turnover on the roster. So there's, with the shortened training camp, Rod Brind'Amour has spoken to this as well. It's, you don't have as much time to teach the systems and do all that. But the good thing is that the Hurricanes don't have a lot of teaching to do, given the roster that's largely the same coming back. And a roster that was competitive and just ran into a Bruins team that was just better last year in that first round. So I think they're 2nd or 3rd. I could see it going either way. But yeah, I think Tampa's certainly the class of that division.
Within this unique division and how everything's set up, is Nashville now considered maybe a rival? Or like, I know there's been, they're pretty close in proximity. They would probably be that rival now for them in this crazy division that they're going to see each other, 8 times?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot. I think a lot of people have been wanting a Nashville-Carolina rivalry. Obviously, the location, just to stayed over from North Carolina to Tennessee. But on top of that, the games in the past have been very entertaining, aggressive games between the two teams. It just makes sense. I think if Carolina had a rival before now, it would probably be a team like Washington. But it was just recently that Carolina got competitive enough to even be considered as a rival of sorts against Washington. So with how this division is lined up, I would imagine that Nashville would present itself as a rivalry option. I believe it was the 2018-19 season when the Hurricanes still had Michael Furland. There was a big fight involving Furland and Austin Watson, who was on the Predators. And that generated a lot of buzz, and their games since then have been very, very competitive. So I would say that would be accurate.
A player who's exciting to watch is Svechnikov. Andrei had a breakout year last year. Do you think he's going to keep on improving even more with those stats this season?
I would say that's the expectation for sure. His first year, he scored 20 even strength goals at the age of 18. It was an impressive debut, and we were all wondering how much of a step he'd take as a second year pro, and it was just right from the start. It was very noticeable. It's not as much about him getting bigger or faster or whatever, because he entered the league as an 18-year-old. It's like 6'2", 185, 190. He was ready physically from the jump in his career, but it's just him learning more about his game and what he is capable of doing. He was kind of timid maybe at times as a rookie. He wasn't really up in the lineup. He was more of a third liner on that team. And then last year he gets time with Aho and Teravainen on the first line, and he really shows what he's capable of. And I would expect nothing more or nothing less than him building off of that. All the damage he's done to this point, he's done as a teenager, which is crazy to think about. He's 20 now. He's entering the final year of his entry-level deal. I think that, there's a lot of motivation for him to build on that. I think that's what the team's expecting as well.
Who's another player that could really impact this season for the Canes?
Oh, there's a few guys. When you're thinking of young guys who are breaking in and maybe have the opportunity to break out, I think of Martin Necas, who broke in last year, kind of like Svechnikov, wasn't using in the top six role necessarily all year, but he produced at about half a point per game as a 20-year-old in the league. He's a very, very talented player. He is a natural center. They use him on the wing, and he was able to, contribute a good amount of offense outside of, the top forwards on the team like Aho, Teravainen, Svechnikov. Necas was right behind them in production. He was a very important secondary point producer, and now he's likely going to be playing with Andrei Svechnikov and Vincent Trocheck on the second line, at least to start out. So he has an opportunity to really step up there. And I think another guy that they're looking at, or guys, is they acquired two important pieces at the deadline last year, and Vincent Trocheck and Brady Shea. Shea is going to be playing with Brett Pesce on the second D pairing. Trocheck's going to be a second line center. They are obviously, these are guys with contracts beyond this year. In Shea's case, it's a long-term deal. So they're expected to be important pieces of the puzzle. So, and Brendan Moore's talked about how good Shea in particular has looked so far in camp. So that would be huge for those two.
Yeah, I've really liked Trocheck's game, especially when he was with the Panthers too. So it'll be exciting to see him get a bit of a bigger role. You can follow Brett on Twitter at BrettFinger. Thanks for stopping by, Brett.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Now in the Windy City, we talk to my pal, Nick Gismondi. He covers the Hawks for the NHL Network, and you can see him ringside on NBC broadcasts at Blackhawk games. You can find him on Twitter at Nick Gismondi. Welcome back to the show, Nick.
Hey, thanks, buddy. How we doing? Ready for some hockey now. I'm so happy that it's time to go. I feel like I've missed it terribly.
Oh, we all have. Yeah. I've been waiting, and then like the retro jerseys came out, and I was like, meh. And then with everything happening this week, I'm like, I want to buy one of those retro jerseys, and now they're all sold out. Now it's too late.
Yeah, you're hyped.
So the Hawks had a weird and wacky offseason coming into the shortened season. It's been a wild one. Traded away Oli Mata for a prospect named Brad Morrison. I thought he might have been the old one. They gave Kubalik the 2-year bridge deal. Crawford is gone. So they brought in Malcolm Subban. They traded Brandon Saad for Nikita Zadorov. Brought in Carl Soderberg on a 1-year deal. Kirby Dach got injured, hit wrist pretty badly at the World Juniors, and now we have a slew of guys going into the IR. That list includes Seabrook, Alex Nylander, and of course, Captain Sirius himself, Jonathan Toews. What's the update on Taser?
A lot of things to digest, certainly, for this team. A lot of moving parts for them. We can start with the long-term IRs. Obviously, Nylander placed on that officially today, so not sure what our timeline is on when we're going to see him back. Should have an update on Brent Seabrook and what's going on with him and when we can expect to see him back and in the mix, probably within the next 24 hours, maybe even shorter than that. And then, of course, the big question is what's going on with Cap? And I don't have much information. They've asked for privacy and to give him a space to get himself back on track. I really don't know much more than that. Everybody's very tight-lipped on it. What I do know about Jonathan Toews, though, is that guy, no matter what the situation is, he finds a way through it. He puts a premium on his health and on his ability to be at his peak. So whatever he's going through right now that he's working to resolve, I think you're going to see him when he does come back, and he will come back, be at 1,000%. And I think that's him being, overabundant to making sure that he's A, taking care of himself, but B, he's delivering everything he possibly can to the organization that he loves and the city that he loves. So I truthfully, my gut doesn't think it's anything, oh my God, life-threatening serious, but it's obviously serious enough that he needs to make sure that he takes it, by the neck and make sure that he has it figured out before he returns to hockey. So unfortunately, I really don't have much more on him. When it comes to players' health and personal lives, especially when they ask for people to back off from it, most people respect that. And I'm certainly one of them, especially for a guy like that who I respect immensely.
We hope he gets well and healthy and in the near future. Dylan Strome, though, signs a 2-year bridge deal. And again, of course, with Taser out, is he the replacement for Taze? That seems like some big skates to fill.
Certainly a huge role for Dylan, and maybe a great opportunity here for him to do what he's been trying to do now for a little while. You're going to see him paired up with DeBrincat and Kane, and I think that early on that is going to be something that you're going to want to look out for. This is where he thrived when he had those opportunities last season. Now with the confidence of a deal in hand, and he doesn't have that sort of pressure on him, and he's playing with his old buddy DeBrincat, and him and Kane are real creative together. We saw some magic between them last year. Maybe this is the thing that he needed. Obviously you don't like to see Jonathan Toews out of the lineup, but certainly opens the door and creates some opportunities for some other guys. And I'm excited to see what Dylan Strome brings to the table. I know that he's excited, and I know that it's a huge opportunity, and I know that he knows that. And if he can do all the things that we think he can do, that I know that he can do, that I've seen him do even back when he was playing for the Erie Otters in the OHL, it's going to be a special year for Dylan.
Speaking about opportunities, what is the plan between the net? Hawks have both you would say unproven goaltenders in Colin Delia and Malcolm Subban.
Another great opportunity here for both of those guys, but the pressure comes down on Malcolm. He's been waiting for an opportunity like this to be able to take the reins and be a true number one and get out from behind guys that he was always sort of playing second fiddle to. In Vegas, there was no taking away the number one spot from Marc-Andre Fleury. And when he got here, it looked as though, okay, he was going to have to be in that number 2 spot and learn a little bit more from Corey Crawford. And then obviously the Hawks make that move and they don't re-sign Corey Crawford. And now the opportunity for Malcolm Subban to be a true and clear number one is certainly there. Knowing what we know about Coach Jeremy Colleton and the way that he's run the goaltending situation, at least last year when he had 2 legit number ones, was a split net between Robin Lehner and Corey Crawford. Well, this year it's a little bit different. I think both those guys fought pretty hard in camp, but I think these first few games of the season are going to see a little bit of a split to give them actual game opportunity in a fast-paced NHL. And then after that, you're going to see a clear leader emerge. I tend to lean a little bit more towards Malcolm Subban, only because he's had a little bit more experience. He's had 2-3 very good mentors in between the pipes ahead of him. And he understands, much like Dylan Strome, that if there's going to ever be a time to make your case and make your proof and show what you can do, now is that for him here.
Yeah, it's a sprint of a season, so they both should get a fair shot here. I like Zadorov on the Avs blue line. Where does he fit right now in that 6, I guess, for the Hawks?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be right in the middle, I think. I think we'll see him probably towards the top of that. This is a guy that's going to bring some toughness. He's going to inject some energy. You're going to see him be a little bit more physical, and I think that's what they'll want out of him. I'm very excited about Mitchell and, on the defensive side for this hockey team. I think you're going to see him get a real good shot. And again, these first few games, because of no scrimmages in a preseason other than the inter squad games, are going to be big telltales. I think most teams are going to use these first few games of the year to really kind of sort of flesh out the last little bits of their roster, not in terms of who's on the roster, but in terms of where do they fit and who do they play with. So I wouldn't fall in love with lines tomorrow on any team across the NHL, and I certainly wouldn't do it with the Chicago Blackhawks, because I think you're going to see some fluctuation and some play with.
We'll have a list of everybody's predictions, including Nick's, on our game notes for this podcast. Go to jablamsports.com/podcasts. This episode specifically, Season 6, Episode 4, Season Preview, Discovery NHL Central Division. With everything going on, people expect the Hawks to drop a little bit in the division. Where do you see them fit in this division?
Yeah, I get that. And I mean, whatever, that's a common play. But what you're going to potentially see here is a bunch of guys that don't want to hear that anymore. And I know the guys in that locker room don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear the whole, you lost your cab, Kirby Dog, Corey Croft. They don't care. It's going to be a very similar situation to what I think I saw in the first year in Vegas. You're going to see a bunch of guys that are being told by the media and fans and everybody that, you're not good enough. You're not blah, 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 blah. It's going to be a tough year. Well, maybe that's exactly what these guys need to really glue themselves together in the locker room and push and come out. So listen, I've always been very pro this organization. I've always been pro this team. I've always been pro the way that they've built, and I've always been, pro Jeremy Colleton. So I think that, I'll reserve a little bit of tendency to see what happens in these first few games, because I just haven't seen them together. Mm-hmm. But if my gut is right, then I think you're going to see Chicago, in the middle. I mean, you've got some good teams here. Carolina, you can't sleep on them. They're going to be a good program this year for sure. Obviously, Tampa is going to be talented. Dallas is going to come in hot. Columbus is good. So, those are my topper end teams, I would think. But I think you're going to get some surprises out of Chicago. I really truthfully do. And if they can catch a groove here and they can get rolling early on, look out.
It's a new original division, but there's always that classic hate between the Wings. Is that their main rival now for this division? Are they? Yeah. For some people, are they maybe fighting for near the bottom? I guess you don't think so, but some other people do.
Yeah, I'm sure other people think that's going to be like a battle between, last place, but I don't feel that way. I love Detroit. Jeff Blashill, the head coach of that organization, is a good friend of mine. I think he's a smart man. But I do think that that rivalry, no matter what, is going to be there a little bit. I like it. You're going to see them a lot this year. It's an original six, so that's a big rivalry. But you can't count out the rivalry that's brewing between the Blackhawks and the Florida Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers, coached by Joel Quenneville, their former coach. So there's a lot of manufactured animosity between those two clubs right now. And you could see that turn into a little bit of a cool rivalry just because it's Coach Q. But I think the main one and the one that we all love is Detroit, Chicago. Let's go back to the original 6 days, the rivalry across the lake. It's an exciting one. And I think we'll see them. I think we'll see that intensify and heat up. And listen, if they are in a battle for the very bottom, you're going to see very competitive games between those two teams.
I think it was 2008, the beginning of the Kane and Tays era. I was at the United Center for that game. I knew how hype and big Kane would be and those guys. And I think Tays didn't start the beginning of the season, but Kane, I was hyped for. I took my buddy with me. We went all the way to Chicago. I said, watch this kid. And then he scored the shootout winner. The place went nuts. They were insulting the Wings fans the entire game. It was an amazing atmosphere. I didn't know the hate that much. I did not know the hate that much until I went to that game.
Well, keep an eye. There's a tie for Patrick Kane to Detroit. He played some of his minor hockey for the Honey Baked organization. And Honey Baked was a big AAA organization in Detroit. I grew up in Detroit. I played for CompuWare. And I actually watched Patrick Kane when he was a 12, 13-year-old playing for Honey Baked. So I've seen Patrick Kane play for quite a while. So I knew. I mean, I watched him, I think, for 5 minutes when he was 12, and I was like, yeah, okay, well. Can't wait to watch this guy in the NHL one day. And it was fun when it came full circle last year, and I got to interview him. I was the first person to interview him after his 1,000th point in the NHL at the United Center there. So it was fun. We had a laugh about that because, he knew I'd been, watching him literally since he was a kid. So it was fun. And there's some great memories there for him, and certainly a little bit of rivalry with Detroit as well, because he's, obviously a Buffalo boy, but a lot of love for Michigan out of Patrick Kane there, I would imagine.
Again, you can find him on Twitter at Nick Gismondi. Great chatting with you always, Nick.
Hey, Pete, thanks for having me on, buddy. I'll talk to you again soon. Let's have some fun tomorrow. Hockey, baby. Let's go.
Woohoo! Now we head over to the C-Bus, where we've got Aaron Portzline. He's an excellent sports writer. He's been writing over 30 years, and he's currently writing at The Athletic, covering the Blue Jackets. You can find him on Twitter at @Portzline. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Well, thank you so much. Good to be with you.
Before we get into the fun stuff, I read your update on the team, the article about the Blue Jackets and 17 players sitting out of practice because of COVID protocols.
Yes.
Ouch. Is there any update? What's going on with that?
Yeah, well, those players the very next day, 15 of them were back. Now they're all back.
Okay.
Club has not said what the problem was. One is led to believe it was a protocol breakdown, not a positive test. If it were a positive test, I don't think they would be back that quickly, even if they were exposed to it and not directly tested positive. One thing I think we should certainly get to, because I think it's going to be with us the entire season, is that there are just going to be ups and downs like this all season, where I don't even just mean positive tests, but where someone runs afoul of the protocol and schedules are bumped. We've already seen Dallas have to move their schedule.
Yep.
The Blue Jackets just canceled canceled practice for 17 of their guys, but they were back at it the next day. Several other teams have had issues. It's going to be difficult. I mean, they couldn't do the bubble again. I think the players were not game for the bubble again. So they're trying to do these little micro bubbles, and this is the price that will be paid. I think it's going to be a sketchy couple of months, but hopefully they'll get it in. It's
going to be tough, and I think I've talked to a few of us now, and I don't know, especially some fans, some might not realize that this isn't the NBA. This is the NHL. They play in a more colder surface. It's the ice. They have the hockey equipment, which is easily gets that nice smell, that beautiful smell that we all love.
Yes.
Right? And then there's always that hockey flu season.
Yeah.
That happens every season. So this is why I feel that guys like Gary Bettman and the rest of the league were very tentative in terms of what they're going to do with the league. They saw the NBA start, and then the NHL's like, oh, I guess we have to start soon. But you could see that they weren't 100% sure, and we're going to have things like what the Dallas Stars are going through.
Yeah, and I think first of all, I think the league deserves a ton of credit for pulling the bubbles off. Like that's incredible.
Yeah,
it was incredible. So the idea that they had no positive tests through all of that is just remarkable. And I think they deserve some credit. We're not even through this yet, but it's a pretty stringent protocol policy. I've thrown it through a couple of people I've met over the last 9 months. I didn't hang out previously with microbiologists and urologists and those type, but I've gotten to know a few people through this. And they don't necessarily approve it. Like they think it was better if you didn't do this. But if you're going to do this, the way that the league's doing it is wise and smart. And you can tell they thought their way through it to make it the best that it can be. I'm not supposed to root for anybody. I'm rooting for everybody to get through this. I think that's a fair thing to do. And I think a lot of smart people have tried really, really hard to make it happen. So,
well, we'll chug on, and hopefully it's a season that we can get through and everybody comes out in the best shape that we can.
Exactly.
My favorite team growing up got taken out by the Blue Jackets in the entry round to the playoffs in the bubble. And then the Blue Jackets made a few tweaks in the offseason. Yes. Wenberg is gone, and they traded Josh Anderson for Max Domi.
Yep.
Where does Max Domi fit, and what type of impact will he bring to this Jackets roster?
Well, Max Domi goes right in the middle of one of their top two lines, and I'll let the season dictate what's the top line and what's the second line. It could very well be Domi between Foligno and Atkinson. That should be a good line, in my opinion. Domi's an important guy on this team. They did not want to trade Josh Anderson. They had issues with Josh Anderson. He needed to go. So that trade you could see coming for more than a year. Not that Domi was coming back, but that Anderson was leaving. Mm-hmm. So Domi is a really, really pivotal player for them. There will be no first-year feeling out process for him. He's not only charged with getting Cam Atkinson back going again. If you remember, Atkinson had 41 goals the year before, had 12 last year, in part because of an ankle injury that nagged him for a while. Nick Foligno, who has scored 30 goals, 31 goals, and 27 goals in previous season, has really dropped off in goal scoring the last couple of years. He had 10 last year. He's expecting more. This is a contract year for him. So Domi goes in between those two. The other aspect of what Domi brings to this team is he allows Boone Jenner, who, if Ontario people listening to this or anybody beyond who's a proud Canadian and knows their hockey, will admire the game of Boone Jenner. This is one of the hardest working players in the National Hockey League. Never complains about anything. Ultimate team guy. But the last few years when Alexander Wenberg has really struggled, it was Boone Jenner that went into the middle, played center ice to sort of give them some stability. Now, I thought he played pretty well at center. But the one thing playing center ice for Jenner, especially in the system they played last year, he was the third guy high in the zone a lot because he doesn't have great wheels. He cannot, as a centerman, he cannot allow himself to get too deep and caught out of position. Some guys could maybe catch up. That's not Boone Jenner's game. You put him on the left wing, which is now what Domi does. And Jenner now can, as I like to say, slick his ears back and play left wing. He can forecheck. He can create havoc. He's the guy along the wall that you don't want to do battle with. And that's where a lot of his offense comes from. It comes from cleaning up the trash around the net, jarring the puck loose. So he's back into his comfort space. And they think Domi can get back to where he was a couple years ago with the Habs, where 28, 44, 72. They think he can bring life back to Atkinson's game. Again, that's a 30-goal scorer, Cam Atkinson. And that's the second line. The top line is Texier with Dubois and Bjorkstrand. And I know a lot of people around this league think they need more jam. They need a little more punch offensively. That's what the Blue Jackets are going to bat with. And we'll see if it's enough.
They've also re-upped Bjorkstrand, and they finally signed Pierre-Luc Dubois. Yeah. What's going on with PLD? It sounds as if he does want to go to maybe a bigger market.
I'll be careful. I'm not going to say why he wants to leave because he has not articulated that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure anybody who really knows would be willing to say at this point what the deal is with PLD. I don't know. Mm-hmm. He signed a 2-year contract. Everybody thought, well, that's good. They're settled now because clearly his trade request was just a ploy to get things to move along. Not the case. Mm-hmm. He still is interested in a trade. Between you and me, I'd be shocked if they traded him this season. Yeah. I think Jarmo Kekalainen, he may have tried to see what the market is for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think that's how reports got out of his interest in being traded. A player like that hits the market. That's a hard secret for many, many people to keep. But I think his inability to trade him is why Dubois signed the 2-year contract to get it done. They now have a little runway to wait for the best deal for him. I don't see it happening during the season, but who knows? Who knows if a team falls out of it and wants to make a move? Who knows if the Blue Jackets fall out of it? I mean, I think they're a playoff team, but I don't think they're so great a playoff team that you can say you know what's going to happen this year. If they fall out of it, who knows where this goes with him. But all signs point to him wanting out. Is it the team says it's not the contract, the player says it isn't the coach, the coach says it isn't the coach. You know, I don't think it's the coach. I'll take the team at its word that the contract negotiation wasn't so ugly that the kid got frustrated and said, get rid of me. But until he says what it is, I don't know that we're going to know for sure. And I'd be surprised, frankly, if he ever did come out and say why.
They're poised to have one of their young superstars maybe really break out this year. Who could that player be on this roster?
Well, I think if you look at the line placement and just look at how their lines are comprised, it better be Alexander Texier, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it better be him. He's on the number one line with Dubois and Bjorkstrand.
Yeah.
That's the high rent district. If you're not producing there, you're not going to be there very long. So that's a great opportunity if you're Alexander Texier. That is a plum assignment. Now, they are incredibly high on this young player. And you see there were moments last year, especially early, where he moved the puck around. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody move the puck like that in Columbus, Ohio, to the point where his line mates, even the ones that are accomplished scorers in this league, just simply were not ready for the puck.
Yeah.
And he dialed it back a little bit after that because the guys weren't ready. He sees the ice extremely well. If he can stay healthy, he's bigger, he's stronger. Like I said, he's got two exceptional line mates. That is a position where you'd better produce. Gustav Nyquist is injured, out for several months after shoulder surgery. So it's Foligno behind Texier. It's Boone Jenner behind them. So Jenner could go into one of those spots. I don't think that's ideal. But Texier is poised to have a big breakout season. The other guy that I think has a shot, he even by his own admission didn't play that great last year, but he had a rookie season, 10-10-20, that a lot of 20-year-old players would love to have in the NHL. Emil Bemstrom, who led the Swedish league in goals as a teenager, the first guy. Look at the list of Swedish teenagers that have led that league in scoring. That's an impressive list of players. So it's in there. He never felt an offensive confidence here his first season in the NHL. I don't think that's unusual for rookies, but he's a guy with some potential. The only reason I say Texier, not Bemstrom, is just by the way that they're being used at present. And Bemstrom is currently on the fourth line. He's in one of those caught in the middle spots where there's not room for him in the top six. He's not a perfect fit on the third line. They love their third line with Jenner, Koivu, and Grigorenko. But so the fourth line is kind of a holding place for him. He's going to see power play time as well. But Texier is the guy that, if you're looking for a young breakout guy, I think he'd be the pick. And again, from the Blue Jackets perspective, it better be.
Before you go, where do you think the Blue Jackets will end up in this Discovery NHL Central Division?
Yeah, Discovery NHL. Who is this segment sponsored by? You know what? I mean, I think you have to say Tampa's the favorite. Hello, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know Kucherov's gone. I'm not sure what they do with Tyler Johnson on waivers today. That's still a hell of a hockey team. Mm-hmm. There is such a thing as the Stanley Cup hangover, so we'll see if they take a while to get going. But that's the best team by far on paper. But after that, I think Columbus is right there. I think Carolina's a sexy pick for a lot of people. I think this division, frankly, is so much better than the other one they could have been in. Mm-hmm. That other one is just loaded. I was talking the other day about the Buffalo Sabres and how I really think that's going to be a markedly improved team. And I don't know how they make the playoffs in that division.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying they can't, but boy, look at this. Look at Boston and Washington, Pittsburgh, Philly. I mean, that division is a bear.
Yeah.
This division with the Columbus is in, who knows? I think there's a couple of unknowns. I'm not sure what Dallas is. I think it's a good team. I'm not sure. I don't know what Nashville is. For the last couple of years, I expected Nashville to be better than they are.
Yeah.
And so I think they're a wild card in all of this. So I think Columbus is in. I don't think anything's guaranteed, but I think they're the two divisions. They're in the one you would pick to be in.
You can find him on Twitter at Portzline. Thank you for stopping by, Aaron.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thanks, man.
Now we'll head over to the Big D and talk to my pal, Bruce Levine. He's the co-host for the Dallas Stars radio broadcast, and you can find him on Twitter at Bruce Levine Puck. Bruce, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back. It's been longer than I was hoping. I'd hope we'd be playing hockey by now, but it's just around the corner for some teams.
Yes, and maybe not around the corner yet for your team. The Stars, which the last time we checked with the COVID update, that seems like 6 players got it and 2 trainers?
6 players and 2 staff. They're not saying who they are.
Yeah.
It's obvious that when you talk about 6 players, you're talking about a pretty significant outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the Dallas Stars had their training camp was the people who were guaranteed roster spots, the veterans coming back from last year, were in one locker room. The people trying to make the team were across the rink in another locker room. We don't know which locker room got infected, but you've got to think that whoever it was that brought COVID, or the people that brought it into that locker room, everybody else there is in a quarantine lockdown mode. We're not getting a whole lot of information that's coming from the league office, but even we saw Bill Daly and Gary Bettman say on Monday that they're still trying to wrap their arms around what exactly happened and determine with the medical professionals when the Stars can even start practicing again. I mean, this is something that, you knew. You look at the NBA, you knew somehow, some way, without being in a bubble, something like this was possible. And unfortunately for the Dallas Stars, it happened very quickly in camp.
When you're talking about the numbers and the players, and I know people aren't sure, but I remember the NHL stating that, okay, this is kind of the camp season, but once the season actually begins, they will tell us who got the positive numbers.
Yeah, and that's something that, well, if you get sick during the regular season, they're not going to tell you who they are proactively. We're not going to find out from the Dallas Stars who the 6 people were that got it. But the bigger concern is if there are 6 people that have it, and the locker room, let's say, for example, the Stars, I believe, had over 30 people at camp.
Yeah.
So who else was in the room with those people? And of the hockey staff that got it, who were they in contact with? So now you're talking about contact tracing and the possible keeping an eye on the spread. And do the people who got it, do they have family? It becomes a much bigger issue than just hockey at this point. You're talking about people who have wives and kids and families possibly being at risk. So it becomes a much bigger deal than just when are the Stars going to play? The question is everybody safe? And you look at somebody like General Manager Jim Nill, who goes to extraordinary lengths to be safe and follow protocol. Well, his wife has been battling cancer for a number of years. Becky has been just an absolute warrior when it comes to fighting this disease. And you want to make sure that, certainly that he doesn't get that. I know he takes all kinds of precautions, but I'm just using that as an example that this is not just hey, when are they going to play hockey? It's everybody who's involved that they come into contact in their lives that has to be concerned and watch and make sure they are able to stay safe.
Yes, and hopefully they do stay safe and very cautious with everything going on. Last time we did check with the Stars, they were inches short of winning that Stanley Cup. So they had I guess you could say long off season, but maybe a short off season when you compare it to maybe some of the teams that didn't enter the bubble. It was interesting because then they let some of the veterans go. Corey Perry's gone, who had a really good showing in the bubble playoffs, as well as Roman Polak. And then they brought in Mark Pysyk out of a few of the people they brought in. What kind of impact or intangibles would Mark bring to this roster?
Well, first of all, you got to remember that Roman Polak opted out. He did not go to the bubble.
That's correct.
And then Stephen Johns got to the bubble and did not feel safe, did not feel he was ready to participate in Stanley Cup playoff hockey. So he did not play. What you bring in with Mark Pysyk is basically a number 6 D-man to pair with Andrei Sekera. If you look at the Dallas Stars, you've got Heiskanen and Jamie Alexiak, who just grew by leaps and bounds on the ice last year. I mean that in a metaphorically sense, considering that he's 6'7", 250 pounds. He can't grow much more. But he, as a player, just dramatically improved his game. And then your other combination up front of the top four is Esa Lindell and John Klingberg. So the Stars feel very good about where they are defensively. You're bringing Pysyk to play with Sekera, but you also have Taylor Fedun and Joel Hanley, each who played in the Stanley Cup playoffs last year. So you've really look at it, you've got 8 guys you feel very comfortable with. And then there's a possibility, and this is a long shot. There's a guy named Julius Honka, who was the Dallas Stars' #1 pick in 2014. He did not progress the way they wanted or he wanted. He actually left the team. They didn't offer him a contract. He left the team last year, went back to Finland for a year, and now he's back with the team. If he can develop and at least harness some of that talent that made him a #1 pick, the Stars could have 9 very good options on the blue line. So Pysyk's going to be there. He's going to start with Sekera, but Rick Bowness has a very solid D-core, and they're very happy with what they have back there.
I'm not sure if it's a stretch, but is Kiravanta going to have a breakout season as he did in some of those big playoff games?
Well, from the line combinations we had at practice before the team shut it down, Kiviranta is playing on a line with Joe Pavelski in the middle and Alexander Radulov on the other wing.
Ooh.
So they've already said this kid is ready, or they're going to give him the first crack at playing top 6 forward positions. He's on the power play. He's playing with Pavelski and Radulov, 2 guys who know how to create offense. So Kiviranta could be a breakout guy. Now, you talk about the Stars letting Corey Perry go. Well, for all of his great play, and Perry was outstanding in the Stanley Cup playoffs, he had 5 goals in the regular season last year. He, there were times where he looked a little bit slow. He just, he had his ups and downs. Well, now you got Kiviranta, who's in his 20s, had a great Stanley Cup playoff. And then you look at guys like Gurianov and Rope Hintz. This team has got to get younger and they've got to get faster. Not that they did badly last year, but as you know, in the game of hockey, the minute you realize you're that half a step behind, the whole league has passed you by. So the Stars have figured out that, we've got this core of older veterans who are still talented, Pavelski, Radulov, Ben, but now you got the young guys coming up to take up the mix. And until Tyler Seguin gets back off the IR, which is, Jim Nill said you're looking at possibly the first or second week of April as really being a realistic target date. Some of these young guys have got to stand up, and find out how to put pucks in the net.
We saw how well Anton played in the playoffs for the Stars. So what's the plan between the pipes between Bishop and Khudobin?
Here's the weird thing. We have not seen Anton Khudobin since training camp. We have not seen it. We have not seen him since Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals. He came over. He had a little bit of trouble getting over. Obviously, with COVID, all the immigration variances are different. He was in quarantine when the Stars were shut down. Ben Bishop had knee surgery in the offseason.
Yep.
He's not going to be ready until the last week of March, first week of April at the earliest. So you're looking at Anton Khudobin going into the season for the first time in his NHL career as the #1 starter. He's going to be the man. The Stars do have a former first-round pick, a kid out of Hockey East, Jake Ottinger, who he's gotten the #1 reps in training camp, and from what we've seen, this kid is good. This kid can play, and he is the future of the Stars in net. They traded up to get him in the draft. They gave up a 3rd round and a 1st round to move up in the 1st round to select him a couple of years back in 2017. And this guy is going to be special. He can play net. So the plan is going to be Khudobin plays, Ottinger's the backup, and then we'll see when Big Ben Bishop comes back around.
It's going to be an interesting season, too, because it's a bit of a sprint, and a lot of teams are talking about going almost 50-50 with their starter and their backup. So Jake might be getting quite a few games.
Yeah, he certainly will. I mean, the one thing about Khudobin is you've heard the phrase in baseball, the guy can get up in the middle of a winter and hit a fastball. Well, Anton Khudobin could wake up in Siberia in the middle of January and stop a hockey puck. That's just what he does. So there's really not a whole lot of concern about Khudobin's durability or his ability to play back-to-backs or 2 games in 3 nights. That'll be fine. But Ottinger has a chance here and he learned so much being in the bubble last year. And if you remember, Ben Bishop, after Game 5 against Colorado, did not suit up for the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs, was not on the bench. So Ottinger learned a lot, being on the bench, being in practice, being the guy. This is just the next natural progression. Khudobin will be fine. Stars are very confident that Ottinger will be a very solid #2, if not a 1B.
So now the Dallas Stars are in the Discovery NHL Central Division. Who is going to be their rival out of this interesting division?
Well, if you want to just take a look right on the surface, they did lose to Tampa in the Stanley Cup Finals, and now they play Tampa 8 times a year. So that would be one of the ones you just look at and go, well, that's normal. So that would be a big one. Chicago, still around. Chicago, although they've had a really turbulent offseason with Chicago, and of course capped off by Jonathan Toews' illness, and we hope he gets better as soon as possible. Yep. We don't know what's wrong with that. I don't know if illness is the right word to describe it, but Chicago's going to be there. And also Detroit. Dallas used to be in the same, remember those great Detroit battles they had in the 90s. Yep. And for a long time, Detroit, there was a General Motors plant that was in Arlington, and when Detroit would come to town, it would be like Joe Louis South back in the day. So the Dallas Stars have some going back. Detroit will be a rival, of course. Tampa, Chicago's always there. And believe it or not, the Stars and Columbus have built up a bit of a healthy dislike for each other. Even though they only play a couple of times a year, they've been some nasty affairs with Columbus. I can see that now they have to play each other. And by the way, the Stars haven't beaten Columbus in 8 consecutive games. So that's one they're going to have to cross. If they want to make the playoffs, they're going to have to find a way to beat Seth Jones in that group rather quickly.
It seems like Columbus really likes to get nasty with a lot of teams.
they do, and people remember it. And you know what? You look at that blue line, and you go, okay, you know what? Just be gritty up front, be nasty, get the puck back to Werenski and Jones, and crash the net. You don't. Hockey doesn't have to be rewritten every 5 years. Sometimes the old get it to the blue line and go to the net works out very well. And Columbus is going to be a battle. It's going to be nasty with them.
Where will the Dallas Stars place at the end of the season in this division? Where do you think, Bruce?
See, that's a good question, because before last week, with teams only having 10 days of training camp, I thought the Stars had an advantage because they didn't have a whole lot of turnover. The groups are still together. They knew each other. I thought coming into the postseason, from the postseason, 100 days before training camp, which is sort of normal for hockey, I thought going into the season they would have an advantage because they have the familiarity. They know each other. They don't have to learn. The defensive pairings don't have to learn each other. They know Rick Bonus's system. They know the offense. But now, the longer the Stars hold out, you've got to wonder, teams that have gotten 2, 3, 4 games under their belts, and then the Stars start up, how hard is it going to be to go from, okay, we have training camp, now we're shut down, now we're going to have training camp again, and now we've got to go straight on the treadmill at full speed with teams that have already played 3 and 4 games. The Stars have a lot of home games in January and February to begin this season, and they're going to have to win those games to get their cushion for the end of the season. This is going to be a much tougher start to the season than a lot of people think. Yeah. It's going to be very difficult to start whenever they start back up, to start up and then have to play teams that have 2, 3, 4 games under their belt at NHL competition. I think the Dallas Stars, if they finish 3rd in the division, they'll be very happy. They learned last year that, it's all about getting to the postseason and going from there. So I could see the Stars finishing 3rd. I could see Columbus. I could see Tampa. I could see Dallas all fighting for that 1, 2, and 3 spot. And, from after that, then who sneaks in? Is it Nashville? Possibly. Is it Florida with their rebuild? Yeah, but the one team I haven't mentioned, Carolina. Carolina has a chance to be a very good team. And I think for a young team, winning a division title would mean more to them than to a Tampa or a Dallas that went so far last year.
You can find him on Twitter at Bruce Levine Puck. Thanks for coming on, Bruce.
Anytime, Pete. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, before we go, my internet went down. Who won the World Junior Championship from the U.S. or Canada? I wasn't really sure of the final score.
Bruce, man, come on, man. Come on. There was just the one day we got off the bed improperly, the one day, and there was a knight who's now wearing gold-plated armor, had a fantastic game, especially that second half. I thought USA had a good first half, especially the first period, and then Canada stepped it up in that second half of that game and just couldn't beat Spencer Knight.
Well, you know what? I'm just teasing because as far as I'm concerned, if the U.S. played Canada every year in the World Junior Championship finals, I would be happy with that. Because those, not because the U.S. has won the last 4, but just because those two teams, when they play each other internationally, I think that's the best rivalry in all of amateur hockey right now. I don't know if you call it amateur, but in junior hockey, U.S. Canada's got a great rivalry going. And just because when I was growing up, if the U.S. made the round of 8 in the World Juniors, it was a amazing feat. Now the fact that U.S. Canada can go toe-to-toe every year, I love it. Absolutely love it. It's great for the game and great for the rivalry.
Well, 2 things on that. Number 1, women's U.S. Canada, phenomenal.
Agreed.
Phenomenal.
Agreed.
And number 2, Team USA, the progression in their prospects and their youths over the last 10, 15 so years, just skyrocketing.
Yeah, they got a lot of good programs here. And what they're also doing is they're getting kids who are good athletes who want to play hockey. It used to be growing up, you had the hockey players, and then you had everybody else. They played some other sports, but if you really want to be a good hockey player, you had to be, to do it. But now you've got kids who can play football and basketball and baseball and hockey, and they're these great all-around athletes who want to be hockey players. You're not recruiting hockey players to be hockey players. You're recruiting some great athletes, and it's really showing with the developmental program and where they're going. And I just love the fact that I don't think this is going to be regression. I think U.S. is going to be a force for decades to come. And, of course, Canada, well, it's still your game.
Hey, it will always be our game. See you later, Bruce.
Take care.
Here's a quick break from all those interviews. I hope you are enjoying this episode. Remember to please subscribe to our podcast, Jablam Sports Hockey, on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, check out our website if you haven't done so already, jablamsports.com. These episodes, the divisional preview episodes, are on Season 6, Episodes 3 to 6. Please check them out. You can go on our podcast pages and find them there as well. To all of our guests' infos, you can get all those there. Players to look out for and their predictions for the entire division are on those episode pages. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Now back to our regular scheduled programming. Let's head over to Motor City and talk to Evan Lobsinger. You can catch him on the Winged Wheel podcast and find him on Twitter at HockeyTownEvan. Welcome to the Jablam Sports Hockey Podcast, Evan.
Thank you for having me.
So the Red Wings had a long offseason, of course. They fell a little bit in the draft. They drafted Lucas Raymond 4th overall. And let me tell you, that kid looks like a badass, if I saw, with everything that he shows off on the ice, and he shows off on the skin as well. So watch out, Wings fans.
Yeah, he was the guy that we were targeting in our mock draft at number 4. There was a ton of rumors that it would be Cole Perfetti because of the links with Saginaw. So we weren't really too sure which way the Red Wings were going. But when they did draft Lucas Raymond, we were ecstatic. And I had him as the number 3 prospect in this draft. So to get him at 4, pretty happy. And he had a great World Juniors. So I know Ryan and Brad are also really excited. So there's a glimmer of hope in Hockeytown right now.
Yeah, there's all those guys look pretty good in World Juniors. And maybe you had him at 3rd, but I don't know. That Stutzel kid, he did impress for Germany. Let's go to the offseason. They traded for Mark Stahl. They bought out Abdelkader. They let go of a couple of guys, including Howard, Daly, Eriksson. So there's a bit of turnover. They brought in Bobby Ryan, Troy Stetcher, Nemestikov, and Thomas Greisch. I'm guessing Greisch will get his fair share between the pipes and him and Bernier.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to go like what a lot of teams are doing is 1A, 1B this year. I think Bernier will it'll probably be a 60-40 split kind of thing. I will think that they'll run with the hot hand, but I do think it's a little bit of Bernier's net. And both have looked really good in training camps so far. So in terms of the Red Wings goaltending, that's probably the best part of the team.
Maybe it is. When you look at the team, is it Joe Veleno's time to step up, or who else could be that breakout player for the Wings this year?
I don't have Veleno making the team, and he's still on loan. So it looks like he'll stay over there for the year unless he gets called back for Grand Rapids. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything breaking on that. So I don't think he will. Honestly, I really don't think anybody's going to make the big team out of camp this year, unless you consider Filip Zadina someone who will be jumping up. But I already consider him a full-time NHLer. I don't really see any young guys making the transition to the Red Wings this year, but I think there'll be a bunch of growth on the roster in terms of, Mantha taking another step. I think Filip Zadina will take another step. Even Dylan Larkin still has lots to develop and lots to prove in the NHL. And Filip Hronek as well. This will be probably the first season where we're going to be relying solely on him for offense from the back end. So, no young guys really making a step, but I think there's a lot of growth in the roster as it stands today.
For growth, which one do you think will have a bigger and better season, Zadina or Hronek?
Everything I've heard out of training camp is Filip Zadina is lighting the world on fire, and he's bringing great demeanor, and is just his professionalism this year is a lot better than what it's been in previous camps. Not to say it's been bad, but there's a noticeable difference this year in the way he's approaching camp. I think it's going to be hard for Hronek to kind of command the back end by himself. But that being said, I think he will take some steps forward as well. He's going to be playing every critical moment of the game, and he'll get the bulk of the power play time. So I think they'll both make a big step this year, but I think in terms of most impactful, I think Filip Zadina will be the biggest impact, because what's plagued the Red Wings last year and years before is secondary scoring, and Zadina is going to be looked upon to be the second line driver.
We'll have a list of everybody's predictions, including Evan's, on our game notes page for the podcast, jablamsports.com/podcasts. This episode specifically is the Season 6, Episode 4 season preview, Discovery NHL Central Division. In this unique year of rivals, where there should be some maybe fight back and some real hatred between the Wings and the Hawks. Who doesn't want that last place out of the two?
Yeah, that's when we did our Central Division preview. We had the Red Wings finishing above Chicago this year. Mm-hmm. Well, 2 or 3 of us did. The rivalry will always be there, but this year it's kind of the toilet bowl, so to speak. Yeah, I had Detroit finishing higher than Chicago.
Yeah.
Look at Chicago. They've got Malcolm Subban and Chris D'Elia as their goalies.
Yeah.
I'll take Detroit over them all day when that's your starting tandem.
Their goalie tandem does not look very good this year. Is there another team outside of Chicago that would be maybe considered a rival in this unique division? Is it possible maybe the Predators then, or is it another team?
That was the team I was going to jump to.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those teams don't look like they did when they were both in the Central and played each other in the playoffs, but both of those teams play each other really hard, and there is animosity between the two. So when you have to play each other 8, 9, 10 times in a season, it's going to develop organically anyways.
Again, you can find him on Twitter at HockeyTownEvan. Thanks for stopping by, Evan.
Thanks so much.
Now we'll go over to the Sunshine State and talk some Cats. With me is George Richards. He covers the Florida Panthers for FloridaHockeyNow.com. How do you enjoy it over there, George?
Yeah, everything's good. Just started up Florida Hockey Now back in July, and the response has been pretty good. So now that hockey's back in South Florida, people are excited and ready to get this season started.
It's going to be an interesting season. You can find George also on Twitter at George Richards. It's been a bit of a long off season for the Panthers, right? The revolving door has been going open and closed the whole entire time. Who's left the team and who's been added? It's been long. Hoffman, Dadonov, Mark Pysyk, Brian Boyle, they've all been gone, as well as Matheson for Hornqvist with Pittsburgh. On top of Patrick coming in, they brought in Gudas for 3 years, and plenty of these one-off deals for some pretty good NHL players. Carter Verhaeghe had a good year in Tampa, Duclair as well in Ottawa, and Wenberg's coming in from Columbus. Which of all these new additions will have the biggest impact on the team?
Well, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see, because there's a lot of guys that new general manager Bill Zito brought in, a lot of guys who have something to prove, right? I mean, Alexander Wenberg, was the future number one center in Columbus and gets a long-term deal. That doesn't work out. He ends up getting bought out, gets a one-year deal here. So there's a lot of guys like that. Vinny Hinostroza, one-year deal. We're going to find out. But to your question, I think Carter Verhaeghe has the best chance to really kind of break out. I think we all know the name Anthony Duclair, right? I mean, he's going to get the opportunity to play on the top line with Barkov and Huberdeau at least to start the season. So Duclair's going to get his. But I don't think a lot of people know Carter Verhaeghe, kind of a fourth-line support guy, couldn't break through, that loaded Tampa Bay team. He is going to get an opportunity with the Florida Panthers. I think Verhaeghe has kind of a breakout season, almost like last year. Noel Acciari comes over, fourth-line guy from the Boston Bruins. Boston fans hated to see him go, but I don't think people around the league knew a lot about Noel Acciari. He gets 20 goals for the Panthers last year. Verhaeghe, same thing. Tampa Bay fans hate to see him go. I think maybe this year, he breaks out like that for the Panthers.
Is there any young player on the team that could have a breakout year?
Yeah, I think rookie Owen Tippett is probably the best candidate. The Panthers have two rookies on the team. But yeah, two real rookies, high draft picks, both first-round picks, and Owen Tippett in 2017. And then the following year, they draft Grigory Denisenko. This will be Denisenko's first North American year. I don't know where he's going to land on the roster, at least to start the year. But Owen Tippett's going to start off running. I mean, he's going to get, maybe top 6, maybe top 9. He's going to be able to get a real opportunity here. This is his fourth training camp with the Panthers. And I think Owen Tippett is going to get every opportunity to show that he can score goals. He scored his whole career at every level he's been at. I think he's going to score here as well.
Florida also had some good standouts at the World Juniors this year. Spencer Knight for Team Canada and, of course, Anton Lundell for Finland were excellent. Does Lundell get a chance or it's a sniff in terms of playing on the team this year?
I don't think so. I think, we asked that of Bill Zito when they drafted him. And, they were like, no, we're going to let him play. He's playing in the Liga. He's playing for HIFK. But he's really taken off since then, right? I mean, since the Panthers drafted him at the middle of the first round, he's one of the leading scorers in the Liga, had an absolutely terrific World Junior for Finland, but I still think that they're going to let him go back. He's going to finish out the year, maybe come to South Florida in the summer, acclimate himself to North America, and be ready to go 21-22. As far as Spencer Knight goes, he was the Panthers' first-round draft pick last year. Had a terrific freshman year at Boston College, just won gold with Team USA, beating another Florida Panther goalie prospect than Devin Levy. But no, I don't think that either. Levy for sure, he's just going to be a freshman at Northeastern, but Spencer Knight in particular, he's going back to Boston College for his sophomore year. They didn't get to play last year. The NCAA tournament was shut down because of COVID. So he's going to get a chance this year, hopefully, to play in a Frozen Four, maybe bring a national championship back to Boston College. And after that, we'll see.
We'll have a list of everybody's predictions for the division, including George's, on our game notes for this podcast. Go to jablamsports.com/podcasts. This episode specifically, Season 6, Episode 4, Season Preview, Discover NHL Central Division. For the Discover Central NHL Central Division, where do you think the Panthers will end up?
I think the Panthers are going to be right in the middle of things. I think, the Tampa Bay Lightning, whether it's the Atlantic or whether it's the Central, they're the class of any division that they're going to be in. They don't have to worry about the Boston Bruins in this one either. So I think Tampa Bay, moves along and wins this division. And then it's kind of a battle for everyone else, I think. I mean, I think you've got Carolina in that mix, Columbus, Dallas, obviously. So right now, just looking at it, I think I've got Tampa Bay winning it, Carolina at second. I've got Florida at fourth.
Florida at fourth. And you mentioned Tampa Bay. I like to ask people, because of all the new, Discover NHL Central Division kind of thing, it's a very new division. They've been shifted. Is and they have that rivalry with Tampa. Is there another team you think they could maybe develop a rivalry being in a very new division?
Yeah, I definitely think it's Columbus. You've got so many players here. Bill Zito was the assistant general manager over there. Sergei Bobrovsky, obviously. Marcus Nudavara now with the Florida Panthers. The Panthers have an obvious pipeline to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they usually play each other 3 times a year. And last year, those were all good games. Columbus has done very well against the Panthers over the last couple of years, but now you got to play 8 times. That should be a lot of fun. Joel Quenneville versus John Tortorella. I think that's going to be a fun 8-game series over the course of the season, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun in the NHL Central this year.
It sure will be. You can find him on Twitter at George Richards. George, thank you for stopping by.
Oh, absolutely. We'll talk later in the year.
Let's go to Music City and talk to Robby Stanley. He's the host of Robby and Rexode Power T podcast on 1025 The Game, and of course the founder of the Unshakable Foundation. Robby, how would you announce your show?
Well, that's a good question. So it's Robby and Rexode. We do basically a sports show in Nashville, Tennessee, and we talk a lot of Preds hockey. We're actually the flagship station of the Nashville Predators, so we do a lot of that. Obviously, NFL with the Titans being there as well, and a tough loss for them the other day against the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs. So we spend a lot of time talking about those two teams, but I got to tell you, I mean, hockey has just taken off in Nashville the last 5 years. I mean, it's been so incredible to watch as a guy who grew up in Nashville and was there when the Predators first came to town, just to see the transformation from then to now with the fan base, the city, really, you name it. It's been incredible. So I think back to the playoff run in 2017 when they got to the Stanley Cup final. That's when this city, I think, really took off as a sports town. So we spend a lot of time talking about the Predators. We do, podcasts. We have special guests, special programming at night. So a lot of time talking about the Predators. Also do some work for NHL.com as well and cover the team that way. So all around hockey here in Nashville.
Oh, I missed out because I took a big, huge, long road trip with my parents a year and a half ago, you could say, in the summer. So I didn't get to see the Preds in action, but I got to see the beautiful town of Nashville City. And it was good because me and my dad always liked dancing. So we kind of like bar hopped all throughout downtown, the whole strip, and Broadway, is it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was fabulous. It's great city. I did not kind of expect how maybe outdoorsy the bars are and everything, and of course the sweet barbecue food. But I knew all about that. But it was really happening. It was really cool. Good to see.
There are certainly a lot of places to have a good time in Nashville. Maybe too many places. At times you got to watch out. At times it could be dangerous. But very few people come to Nashville and don't have a good time. That's for sure.
You can also find Robby on Twitter at rstanleyNHL. Welcome to my center of the universe, Robby.
It's good to be here. I'm glad. I thank you for having me.
Last time we checked, the Preds lost to the Coyotes in the qualifying round in the bubble playoffs. I was upset. I even took my boy Roman Yoshi in the playoff pool, and damn, that bothered me.
Yeah, it bothered a lot of people here in Nashville too.
Yeah.
I could promise you. I mean, it was disappointing, and they had such an up and down regular season. They fired Peter Laviolette. He was out right after the Winter Classic. Really hard to believe this time a year ago they had made that move. John Hines comes in, and you feel like things are starting to trend back around in the right direction. They were starting to play a little bit better, and then COVID hits, and the season pauses, and you go months without playing, obviously, come back in training camp, and the biggest problem with the team last year was the play of some of their top guys like Ryan Johansson and Philip Forsberg and Victor Arvidsson, Matt Duchene.
Yeah.
And maybe even more frustrating was 3 of those guys in that series against Arizona, Forsberg, Arvidsson, and Johansson, played great. I mean, they were by far better than they were at any point in the regular season, and they still got beaten 4 games. So that was very concerning for Predators fans, very concerning for, I think, the front office, David Poile. He made some changes heading into this season, and they're going to look different. It's not going to be as skilled of a team on paper, but they're hoping that the toughness they brought in, maybe that different style of play, and really a mentality change more than anything ends up being the difference for them this year.
They traded Nick Bonino for a couple of picks for Luke Kunin and a 4th rounder. For Kunin, is he poised for a breakout season type player, or is it maybe somebody else that you think could have a breakout season for the Preds?
Well, it's interesting because I think you look at him specifically. He's a guy I think the Predators feel like can play in the top 6. And he really didn't get that opportunity a lot in Minnesota. And I think in a perfect world, to me, he's probably more of a third-line guy. I mean, he can play at center. He can play on the wing. So it doesn't really matter where you put him. But I think just based on where this lineup is, especially to begin the season for the Predators, I mean, they've got Mikhail Granlund back in the fold. He's going through some immigration stuff right now, not going to be available the first few games. I think that's going to be a time where they see what they've got in Cunnin and see where he can fit in on the top 6. I think that's something there. You know, he's a young guy. What is he, 24 years old still? Mm-hmm. So a former first-round pick that they feel like has potential to continue to play at a high level and continue to progress in his career. And the biggest question this year is who's going to play with Matt Duchene and who's going to be able to be productive with Matt Duchene. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a kind of a revolving door of guys that end up on that second line. But I do think there's a pretty good chance that Cunnin begins the season on the second line because I think the Predators are very curious to see what they've got in that guy.
They've also brought in Erik Haula. Mm-hmm. Where is he fitting right now in the lineup, and what kind of impact can he bring to the roster?
It's interesting because he's a guy that I think really projects to probably be the third-line center for this group, if I had to guess. But right now, given all the situations they've had in training camp, he's on the second line on the wing. So I don't know if that's going to be a long-term spot for him. I think right now with Granlund out, that's just the natural fit. And we've seen Haula before be productive. I mean, that year he had with Vegas before the injuries came, he was really, really good in Vegas. So I think in a perfect world, Haula's probably the third-line center for this team. And then all of a sudden, you know, you feel pretty good about your center depth, I think, if you're the Predators, with Johansson down the middle, Duchene on the second line, and then Haula on the third line. Colton Sissons is a guy also that they can kind of mix and match and play anywhere that they want to play. So I think when everything gets settled, everybody's healthy, Haula's going to settle in on that third line, and you're hoping maybe some more scoring touch in the bottom 6. I mean, Bonino actually, and you mentioned him to start this segment about, you know, just the trade that they made with Luke Cunnin. He was a guy, one of the few last year, that was pretty reliable offensively. He had 18 goals, and getting 18 goals out of your third line center, pretty good. I mean, I think you'll take that if you're the Predators, especially given that the season was shortened and you didn't get to 82 games. So if you could start to get some more offense in your bottom 6, that's going to be key, because this is a team where the biggest question about the whole team in general is where's the offense going to come from? Can it be there on a consistent basis? And I think Haula, if he's back to form, if he can stay healthy, which has been a big challenge for him in the last couple of years, he's a candidate.
We have a list of everybody's predictions, and we'll have yours as well, Robby, on our game notes for this podcast. If you go to blampsports.com/podcasts, this episode specifically, Season 6, Episode 4, Season Preview, Discovery NHL Central Division. We'll get yours for the Preds specifically right now when the season is over. What spot do you think they'll be in say, maybe a slightly easier division than if you compare it to the other ones?
Yeah, I think so. I think that has Predators fans excited because, you know, they're still tough. You've got Tampa Bay. Dallas is still there. You know, obviously you're looking around the rest of the division, and St. Louis is gone. Colorado is gone. Minnesota's gone. Winnipeg's gone. And those are pretty good teams in the Central Division that are normally there. So I think the Predators do have an easier route this time with this division specifically. Now, I say that, and it's funny to say that because you've got the defending Stanley Cup champions and also the team that represented the Western Conference still in the division with you. I really like Carolina. I think they're really good, really young and fast. Rod Brendamore's done a great job there. So right now, if I had to handicap it with the Predators, just based on where I think they stand in this division, I think 4th is probably right around where I put them. I think they'll be fighting with Columbus right in that 4th and 5th spot. I still like Tampa Bay a lot in the division. I think the Dallas is going to be good as well. And Carolina, I think, like I said, with Aho in there, you've got Svechnikov as well. They've got so many great pieces, great young pieces offensively. I think they're going to be pretty tough to deal with this year. So the Predators, based on the offense and how limited I think it could be at times until I'm proven otherwise. I mean, you're in wait and see mode with this team offensively. I think the Predators will be right on that playoff edge, fighting it out for the 4th spot with maybe Columbus.
Does that make Columbus a bit of a new rival within this crazy unique year?
I think it should. And I think not only Columbus, but Carolina as well, because you look geographically, I mean, Carolina is pretty close to Nashville. As a matter of fact, like, Predators general manager David Poyle's talked about this before in terms of feeling like that should be a natural rivalry just based on how close these two teams are. And you think back to when Columbus first came into the league, they were a part of the Central Division. They were in the same division with the Predators. So it's almost reigniting an old rivalry from that standpoint. And Nashville has had a ton of success against Columbus throughout the history of their franchise. I know, speaking to a lot of Columbus fans, they hate the Predators. And if you've been around the Blue Jackets for a while, going back to the old days of Rick Nash and as they were building their franchise up, they despised the Nashville Predators. So I'm really excited, number one, to see that rivalry get renewed because I like a lot of the pieces that Columbus has, but there's always kind of the history of the trade too. I mean, the Predators traded Seth Jones away for Ryan Johansson. It was straight up 1-for-1. And those two guys are always going to be measured against each other in the type of careers that they're having. I think Seth Jones obviously has had more individual success. The Predators got to a Stanley Cup final with Ryan Johansson leading the way. So it's worked out well, I think, for both teams, but there's so many different elements. Then you factor in John Tortorella as well, which is always one of my favorite people to watch on the planet, just with how entertaining he could be. So I'm really looking forward to that rivalry coming back with the Predators and Columbus, and interested to see if a new one can be born with them in Carolina.
You can find him on Twitter at @RStanleyNHL. Thanks for stopping by, Robby.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's time to go to the Big Guava. Is that what they call it in Tampa? The Big Guava?
It's one of the names. There's many names that Tampa's have, but yeah, we do have a celebration down here normally around Halloween called Guavaween through Ybor City, which is sort of the cultural area where the cigar makers used to be. Let's just say there's some outrageously crazy costumes that make their way down 7th Avenue in Ybor City during Guavaween.
Yes, and this is my guest, Erik Erlendsson. He's back on the show again. He's been covering the Tampa Bay Lightning for over 20 years. Right now, you can find him on lightninginsider.com. You can find him on Twitter at Erik_Erlendsson. Erik, welcome back.
Thanks, Peter. How are you, man? I love the hat.
Oh, thanks for the hat. Yeah, I'm wearing the Nordiques hat. I don't know why. I just felt it's a little classy. Little retro. I've been feeling retro. I've been looking at the retro jerseys lately now. I don't know why. I guess because now hockey's coming back and getting geared up, excited. A lot of teams are actually sold out of the retros.
Yeah, the Lightning sold out of them pretty quick, which I was surprised. It was a little weird for me, who's covered this team as long as I have, to see the old school logo and some of the new school colors. So that was weird. But the one cool thing about the Lightning reverse retro jerseys is back when they had those god-awful third jerseys back in the mid-'90s, they had what they call the victory stripes underneath the arm, right? So when you score a goal, you raise your arms, you see the victory stripes. Those are back. Those are pretty cool.
I like those jerseys, and I like the kind of the lightning rain along the side of it, right? Yeah. It was really...
they put a lot of work into it, there's no doubt.
So Tampa had a busy offseason, I would say, especially after congratulations on winning the Cup. Bogosian, Shattenkirk, and even I was a little surprised to see Carter Verhaeghe gone as well. They re-signed their solid RFAs in Sergachev and Cirelli finally. And then they announced Kucherov is going on long-term IR.
Very eventful offseason for sure. The big loss, of course, is free agent-wise anyways, is Kevin Shattenkirk. He really sort of rehabilitated his game, if you will, especially in the second half of the season in the playoffs. And, we all knew when he signed there was a good chance that it was going to be a one-year deal regardless. But boy, did he play well. They're going to miss him as a right-handed shot. They're kind of thin over the right-hand side with their defensemen. But yeah, the Kucherov situation kind of came out of nowhere. Obviously, we can't attend these pre-practice, pre-training camp workouts that some of the teams were doing. So he had reported back on December 3rd that he was having some hip issues. They tried to do some treatment with it, worked their way through it, and eventually he got to the point where it wasn't going to be in the best interest. So he underwent surgery, which, oh, by the way, just happens to be convenient. And they're not correlated here. They don't want to lose Nikita Kucherov to open up the salary cap space, but it works out for them because they were able to bring back Tyler Johnson. There was a lot of speculation around him and being able to get cap compliant. So the injury to Nikita Kucherov, while you're definitely going to miss his presence, especially on the power play, it allows that basically most of the roster that was with this team last year returns. And certainly many of the key components outside of Kevin Shattenkirk are back for a chance at a repeat. And I think that has to have Lightning fans excited, even though you're going to lose Nikita Kucherov for the regular season. Word is there's a good chance he could back for the playoffs. And what kind of a boost would that be to add in Nikita Kucherov going into the playoffs?
With Kucherov out, I know nobody can fill these shoes, but who's the closest to making that huge, jump or impact offensively for them? And mind you, I just did my fantasy pool, and I added Coleman, and I added Palat because I thought they might get a little bit more chance offensively.
You should have grabbed Mikhail Sergachev, too, because he's a guy who, at least in the latter stages of training camp, was over in that right circle where Kucherov normally is on the power play. And if he's going to get those type of minutes, he's obviously has a great shot. We've seen that in the early stages of his career. But if he starts to add that repertoire of being a guy who can produce top minute power play points, he could be somebody that's going to pick up some of the offense, at least on the power play. From a forward standpoint, Blake Coleman's going to be interesting. He has a couple 20-goal seasons. But that was in more of a first or second line role with the Devils, right? Well, he's going to start out on the third line here, just as we saw in the playoffs with Yanni Gordon and Barclay Goodrow. That line has remained intact here during three training camp, and certainly with the start of the season, it'll get that way. But he is a guy who's capable of doing it. With the void, though, like you can't replace a 128-point guy, right? Mm-hmm. So look for Coleman to try and step up his offensive game. A couple years ago when Steven Stamkos was injured, Victor Hedman said, okay, I got to help produce more offense. I got to be a guy. So I'd be interested to see if he kind of takes that to heart in this situation as well. But the guy they're kind of looking towards to try and fill some of those minutes and maybe add some offense is Alex Volkov. He's a former second-round draft pick a few years ago. He's coming into his fourth year pro now. They inserted him into the lineup for Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final after not being in any of the games up to that point in the bubble. He's got some offensive upside to his game. He's got a little bit of grit to his game. Didn't really translate as well in the AHL as they had hoped. He had a couple of 20-goal seasons to start there. His numbers dipped last season. But they're hoping that a move to the NHL is going to be something that he's going to take advantage of. Looks like he'll probably start in a fourth-line role, but he's more of a top-9 guy. As the season goes on, he might be somebody that gets some of those minutes and hopefully add some of the offense.
You jumped the gun on me with Sergachev, and I think he is one guy for sure that will probably have a good breakout season. You can follow it up with more Sergachev, but as well, I kind of want to touch point on what you see out of Cal Foote and if he's going to jump in the lineup, especially with a couple of those guys gone, including, of course, last year, Coburn is gone too.
Yeah, he's going to get a chance. 17th overall pick or 19th overall pick a couple years ago. 2 years he spent now in Syracuse. Hasn't had a call-up, so he'll start the season on the roster. As I mentioned, they're thin on the right-hand side, right? You've got Jan Rutta, who they re-signed. We expect him to be paired with Victor Hedman. Erik Chernak is back. Him and Ryan McDonough have been a solid pairing throughout. And you have Luke Shen, and then you have Cal Foote. Those are your four right-handed shot defensemen to start the season. Not the strongest, certainly not as strong as last year on the right-hand side. So he's going to get every opportunity to kind of step in and see where he's at. He's got a pretty good shot. He's put up a couple of double-digit goal years in the American Hockey League with Syracuse, so he has that big shot. The one thing that they've wanted to work with him on is his decision-making. Just be a little bit quicker with your decision-making. Don't put yourself into situations. And that's poise that you tend to learn as you get better at in your career. So they're hoping he's ready to take that next step. So they're excited about the opportunity. He'll be in the lineup opening night for those couple of games against the Blackhawks. He was paired with Sergachev during the last scrimmage. So if you kind of read in between those lines, there's a good chance that that's where he's going to at least get some minutes to start the game. But they're excited. They haven't really developed defensemen in the 10 years since Jeff Vinik took over, first with Steve Yzerman as GM, now with Julian Brisebois. They've never really developed those type of defensemen. That's why they had to go out and acquire Sergachev from Montreal to kind of fill that void. They're hoping Cal Foote steps in, especially as a right-handed shot guy with some size.
It's going to be an interesting year, interesting division now being in the Central. I would like to throw this at everybody, and I'm going to throw it at you. Who would you consider in this division a new rival for the team now? I guess it could be considered maybe Dallas now, since there is that Cup final history.
Recent Cup history too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you not too often you see Stanley Cup finalists end up being division opponents the next year. So they're going to see each other 8 times. But look, Corey Perry's not there anymore, right? So there was a lot of hate with Corey Perry, especially with the way he treated Braden Point in the Stanley Cup final. But that's certainly going to bustle up a little bit. But I think Carolina too. You know, they're old Southeast Division rivals. Saw a lot of each other in the Southeast Division days. Haven't seen as much in the last couple of years when they revamped the divisions. But Carolina's going to be a good team. I think they're probably the second best team in this division. The way that Svechnikov has really improved over the years. Sebastian Aho was just a beast in the postseason when they were in there, especially in that opening round series against the Rangers. You know, they've got a great back end with Slavin and Hamilton and Pesce and those guys. That's a really good team. So when you have 2 really good teams facing off against each other for 8 years, good chance they'll see each other in the playoffs too. When we get to that point in May, I think that's one that can kind of develop as the season goes on, just because there's an old Southeast Division rivalry there between the 2 teams.
I'm going to have Erik give me his 1 to 8 for the division. It's going to be on the game notes on website. Check out jablamsports.com/podcasts. This one's episode 4 of season 6, the Discovery NHL Central Division. Where do you think at the end of the year in this division the Lightning will end up?
Wow, I haven't given solid predictions yet, but I don't see any reason why Tampa Bay won't win this division, even without Nikita Kucherov. I mean, you've got a Norris Trophy winner, Victor Hedman. You've got a Rocket Richard Trophy winner in Steven Stamkos. You have, most importantly, a Vezina Trophy winner in Andrei Vasilevsky. You've got Ryan McDonough. You've got an improving Mikhail Sergachev. You've got a healthy Andrei Palat. You've got Braden Point, who was just fantastic in the postseason. Anthony Cirelli, who's going to be a Selke winner at some point in his career. He finished top 5, which is unheard of for a player just in their 3rd year to kind of have that sort of respect for that award. There's a ton of talent on this team. I think they need some help on the back end with depth as you get later in the season. Hopefully they can use some of the minimal cap space that they're going to be able to accumulate to bring in some help on the back end. I don't see any reason why Tampa Bay can't win this division. I think Carolina is a good choice to finish 2nd. I see Dallas 3rd. I keep waiting for the Florida Panthers to take a step forward. It hasn't happened yet. If they can get Bobrovsky to be the Bobrovsky that he was in Columbus, I think they have a good chance of finishing 4th, which is going to make it hard for Nashville. I think Nashville and Florida are going to be the 2 teams kind of battling out there for that 4 and 5 position. Remember, only 4 teams get in in the division. Everything is divisional based. So, and then, you know, pick your order where Chicago's going to be, Detroit's going to be. It's a little thin on the bottom part of this division, but the top end is pretty heavy.
You can find him on Twitter at Erik_Erlendsson. Erik, thank you for joining us.
All right, Peter, good to be on again.
I hope you enjoyed our Discovery NHL Central Division. 2 of 4. Only 2 more to go over the next week. Thank you to our guests again. It was great having them on and finding out which players to look out for on each team. Remember, if you have enjoyed anything on this episode or you didn't, please tweet me or our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at Russia98 or the entire team at Jablam Sports. If you want, you can contact us, or if you have any questions or ideas for the shows, also, you can use the hashtag Jablam Sports, that's JABLAM Sports, or you can go to our contact page on our website, jablamsports.com/contact. Please check out our website, again, jablamsports.com, to see all our podcast episodes and even game notes for every episode. You'll get the info from our guests and links to things we mentioned on the show. For these divisional preview series, again, go to our podcasts. And you can go to season 6, episodes 3 to 6 for these. And you can see all of the predictions our guests gave for the entire division. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. Also, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends. You can also follow us on our Facebook group. For this episode, our shout out is to Brad Mulligan. He's a recent co-worker of mine at City News, and I've gotten to know him pretty well during the pandemic. With the few people coming in to work, it's challenging, but he's been a hard-working colleague, and it's great to see him change his career around to find unique ways to keep working. And he's also been focusing on his photography. You can check it out on Instagram at Bradley Mulligan. Check out his work. It's pretty cool and unique. Not to mention, he's also going to loan me one of his excellent Nikon DSLRs for my imaging class when I go back to sports journalism at Centennial in a week. And to all of our followers, I'm giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.